Welcome to Resiliency Within. Our show today is entitled Domestic Violence, Finding the Strength to Leave. I have a wonderful guest, Beverly Gooden, that I will introduce to you in just a few moments. But first, I want to give you some facts. 1 in 4 women globally experiences domestic violence. On average, it takes 7 times for most survivors to successfully leave an abusive relationship. But behind the statistics are human beings. And Beverly will share her heart-wrenching experience of intimate partner violence and what she had to do to walk away, and how others can use her experiences to escape their own abuse. She will share practical advice on things like finances, possessions, and housing, from skimming the grocery money to squirreling away personal belongings to navigate a domestic violence shelter. As importantly, she offers strategies for overcoming the social and emotional barriers survivors often face, such as overcritical social circles and most powerfully love. And I think a lot of people often say, why don't you just leave? And it's not so easy. Let me tell you a little bit more. Beverly is a writer and the creator of the viral social media movement, hashtag Why I Stayed. She earned a master's degree in social justice from Loyola University, Chicago, where she wrote her thesis on institutional responses to single women experiencing intimate partner violence. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Time, and she's been interviewed on NPR and Point and All Things Considered, ABC's Good Morning America, NBC's Today Show, and now Voice America. And she lives in Houston, Texas. She's an author of Surviving Why We Stay and How We Leave Abusive Relationships. And we hope you all go out and buy that book today after you hear Beverly talk about her experiences. So
Yeah.
welcome, Beverly. So good
Thank you,
to meet
Elaine. It's
you.
so good to meet you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, as we're getting started today, I always like to ask my guests anything especially on your mind right now before we start with some of the questions we prepared today.
Oh, anything on yes, actually. So one thing that I was thinking about last night, and I just kind of tweeted about it a little bit, is the way that we use language. One of the things I've been thinking about in terms of domestic violence and the conversations that we have now and in the future is I've noticed that some people will use domestic violence or abuse specific terms like gaslighting to reference anything that happens in their relationship that they didn't like. And I think it's really important to use gaslighting and all the other abuse related terms exactly the way that they were created to be made to be stated, because if we use gaslighting and we just mean our feelings were hurt, or something like that, then we're
Yeah.
diluting the meaning of the term itself. And that's something that I've been thinking about literally over the last like 24, 48 hours, because I've seen it a lot lately.
And we don't want to dilute the words, the meaning of the words, because domestic violence is deadly. And
Yes.
and we have
Right.
to pay attention to that. And it's not something to look at lightly or to
Right.
minimize what happens to people all over the world,
Exactly.
as a result of it. So thank you for starting with that. So
Okay.
and so I want to start by asking you a little bit about your personal story. Um, and you've decided to share it in your book, and I'm wondering if you could maybe tell us a little bit about what happened to you. And
Yeah.
I ask you that with all respect. You can tell us
Oh
as
yeah.
little or as much as you want.
Thank you.
And also, knowing that you did decide to share aspects of your experiences. So, and kind of what led you to decide to do that? Because
Yeah.
I think that's kind of an act of bravery and courage as
Oh,
well.
thank you.
Yes.
And it's funny that you say that because I never wanted to. It was never my intention to uh do this. It really wasn't. I didn't when I got out of my marriage, I planned on never talking about it again. Seriously, like I planned on never talking about it. Speaking about it for sure, not writing about it. It was over, and I was happy with that as the result. So a little bit about myself and my relationship. I met my ex-husband when I was in college and went to grad school, and we started dating, and it's it's weird because everything was fine, and I think that is part of the story of abuse that a lot of people don't realize is that it starts fine. Everything is good. It's romantic. It doesn't even have to be like overly romantic. It can just be like generally what you want in a relationship and you think you have it. And that was the story with me. I dated him and everything was good. And, we were growing together, making plans together. He met my family. We got a dog, like kind of like all the things
You're
that
like
you
all the
do.
things that you want in life. You think, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, things are stacking up. This is really good.
Right? Like it's just happening and it's
Yeah.
happening in the moment that I want it to. And, everything's hitting on all cylinders. And then one day on my birthday, he threw me a birthday party. And it was the very first time that he ever physically harmed me. He was upset because of something that happened at the party. And after it was over, he threw me up against the wall and he started to strangle me. And first time, it had been 7 to 8 months that we've been dating, never physically harmed me in any way. And so, because that was the first time that that had happened, and I had a history of him not being violent, I convinced myself that it was me. Like, I convinced myself that this behavior was an anomaly. It wasn't who he was. It was something I did. I could fix it. I could change it. I could, this is my fault. It's not him because he's this good person that I've known all this time. So
And
I
Beverly, that's not an atypical reaction when it first happens. I think that's what I really want all of our listeners who may be in a relationship right now, or maybe know someone they love in a relationship, that you think,
yeah,
okay, well, he did it once, but oh, I've got 7 months of him being just like
right.
fabulous. We even have a dog. This must have
Beautiful.
been like some, wild thing that he will never do again. But
Yeah.
sadly, and also the self-blame. Oh, if I would have done
Hmm.
it differently, because that can be the beginnings, I think, as we both know, of the cycle of violence, because
Yeah.
then the projection and blame is on you and he
Right.
doesn't have responsibility. So please
Right.
continue. Yes, please continue.
That's also true. And it's such a good point because I think that, it's easy to blame yourself, particularly when someone else is blaming you too. And that's what makes, the culture of victim blaming so deadly is because now you have three people blaming you. You have the abuser, and you have society. But that's another tangent. So to
Yeah,
go back,
but it
yeah.
really is. It really is. And there's so many reasons why people say, and I mean, this can happen with families, as we know. Oh,
Yeah.
honey, you just need to you just need to just pay attention and just apologize. Everything's going to be okay. He's a
Right.
good guy. I mean, there can be a minimization, which
Yeah.
also can be part of why someone
Yes.
stays. Well, because maybe they're
Yeah.
right, because maybe things will get better. So anyway,
And
continue.
you're told that you hold the power to change the dynamic. You are told that you have the power to fix the situation. We're not told that it's something that is calculated. We're not told that this was intentional, that this is on purpose, that it's been building up to this moment. We're not told that. We're just told this happened, you can control it, maybe if you pray about it, or, just kind of like all these things that I can do to fix it, and that isn't the case. But so he did that. He let me go. I didn't leave him. I intended to figure out why he did it and fix it. That was it.
And
That was the whole.
did he apologize? Did he say, "Oh,
He
I'll never
always
do this
did.
again"? Yeah.
Every time that he did anything, he always apologized. And so he did that time. I accepted it quickly because, again, it wasn't who I knew of
Yes.
him. And so it was like, okay, of course you won't do this again. Of course, this is not who you are, all the things that abusers will say. And so, and it didn't happen for a while. That's another point I want to make to your viewers and listeners is that not abuse is not always constant. It's not always every day, maybe not every week or every month. That doesn't make it any less abuse. It just means the incidents are staggered. And so another way I convinced myself that it was my fault or that it wasn't who he was is because it was timed appropriately. So something would happen and then nothing would happen for 3 months. 3 months is enough time to convince yourself, that it was an unusual occurrence,
Well, so Beverly, can I ask you something? So in
Yeah.
between the times that he would strike out at you, did you notice that you started to change, that you started
Mm,
like walking on eggshells? Let's see. Oh my goodness, I
yeah.
need to make sure that I'm doing everything on my side of the street that's right and proper.
Yeah.
And did you do that or not? Did you start to being like more hyper vigilant? I guess
In
that's
the
the
beginning,
question.
I didn't. In the beginning, I didn't. it took me a long time to identify what was going on as abuse. I didn't even call it that. It was just a situation, you know. And so I didn't change anything about myself at first. I wanted to figure out why he did that the first few times. And then it turned into I need to change myself so that this doesn't continue. You know, so it didn't move from, I need to figure out why you're doing that. I don't know, I'm going to leave. And went from, I still don't understand why this is happening. So let me turn it inward and trying to fix it that way. That's what
Okay.
happened. And so eventually
Right.
I became hyper
Well,
vigilant, but
I
at
just want
first
to
I wasn't.
say, I want to say one thing to anybody that may be in the same situation. I want to just say that if anyone close to you or anyone tries to strangle you, that is an act of violence, that is abuse,
Yeah.
and that is something that the person needs help right away.
Yes.
And if they're
Yes.
not willing to get help, then you have to help yourself if possible. You're going to tell us, and I know that's not so easy, but I want to dispel that. And really, it's kind of a myth.
Strangulation is
Yeah.
danger. Yeah.
Strangulation can lead to death and has lead to death.
Yes.
So it's not a benign act, even if it
No.
happens only once, even after 7 months of being a model citizen. The one time is enough to say,
Yeah.
oh my. And what we know about the cycle of violence is that it will continue and it will escalate. And so
Mhm.
that's just such an important thing to know.
It's
And
true.
and we
It's
want to
true.
just kind of embrace and, kind of put our arms around all of you that are living in that
Yeah.
situation to know that
Yes.
there is help available. And that's why we're going to talk about the next question, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
first part of your book subtitle is why we stay and why do so many people stay in abusive relationships before we get to how to leave, because we want to
Yeah.
definitely get to that part. So
Yeah.
yes, so
Yeah.
why do we stay?
Yeah. The most common reason is resources. You know, resources have to do with everything. And then by that, I mean money, you know, time, um, access to childcare if you have children, or ways to feed yourself and your children. Everything is about resources. And I think now how m- people that maybe didn't realize that before are starting to, with gas prices being so high. They're coming down, but like we had that moment where they skyrocketed with inflation, with everything. You know, if we who are not experiencing violence at home have issues with access to resources, can you imagine what it's like for someone who is experiencing violence at home and has nowhere to go? It's resources. And so, this is why a lot of agencies and shelters provide specific resources to help people get out. They provide transportation, bus passes, things like that, shelter, food, socks, childcare, babysitting. They provide all of these things because those are inhibitors. Those are reasons why people can't leave. And so it has to do with resources. I state specifically me because well, part of it was love. I don't want to minimize that at all. Like I wanted to be with him. The majority of it was that I didn't have anything on my own. I had one bank account with him, one debit card, one credit card. We had one car, one, obviously one apartment. Everything that I had was his. I didn't have anything of my own. Any dollar I spent, he knew, and so that story is not unique. As you know, like that is very common. It's part of how you get trapped in abuse anyway, is that your access to resources become restricted by your abuser. They don't want you to work, or they run up your credit card so you don't have any money, or they tell you not to leave the house, or they take away your car. So there's just one car. You become completely dependent on them, and it's by design. And so that was my situation. And so that's why I stayed. And it's a lot of reasons why a lot of people stay.
Yeah, I kind of want to just weigh another thing too, because I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so I've worked in this area for many, many years. And one of the reasons why too is fear,
Hmm.
because oftentimes an abuser will say, "Well, if you leave, you know what can happen." And so, because the violence has been existing in the household, there's the fear that if I leave, it could get
Yeah,
worse for me or my children.
it
And
does.
and so, for that reason too, because you've been a victim of actually being physically assaulted, that's not again a benign threat, or a threat that you don't think is
You have
beyond
to take it
the yeah,
seriously. Yeah.
seriously, because women die every day at the
Yeah.
hands. I don't want to just say women, because I know that there's men and
People
people
do.
that
Yeah.
identify as, non-binary, that lose their lives every single day because they have been they've been killed by their
Yes.
abuser that who they also loved. And I think that's part of
Yeah.
that's the treachery of it, because it's not a
Yeah.
clean thing. It's like this person that you love and that has shown love to you also can beat the hell out of you. And
Yeah.
that's just the hard thing. It almost makes it that much harder
It's
because you
so
just hope
interesting.
for that love again. Yes, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and one of those statistics that I've heard a lot is that the most dangerous time for someone to leave an abusive relationship is the 2 weeks following the time that they've left. So that is the moment where the violence escalates. It's because the abuser has lost control of you, and they want you back. They want that control back, rather. They want that power back. And so the violence escalates. And so it's actually leaving is the most dangerous time um, in the relationship. And so I think, when you're living with someone or when you're involved with someone who is violent and who might be unpredictably violent, fear is a definite factor in staying,
Yes,
because
yes,
how do you know that the threats won't be true? Because everything you know about them at this point is that they have the capacity for violence. And so
yes,
if you tell me after being violent toward me, if you leave me, I'll kill you, I'm going to believe that. I'm going to believe
yes,
that.
yes,
And so my ex never said that to me, but I know that that's a story of a lot of people who
right.
experience abuse, is that they get threatened in that way. And it's fear. It's
It's
fear,
fear.
you know?
And we're going to talk a little bit more about this a little bit, but I also want anyone that's listening at this point to know that's one of the reasons why
Mm.
shelters keep themselves very anonymous in terms of where they're
Mhm.
located and safe houses, because they know that. So I want, if
Yeah.
anybody's considering leaving, to know that if you contact your local shelter, they will try everything possible to get you into a safer place that is anonymous so that the
Mhm.
abuser cannot find you. So I just want to assure people
That's
that
true.
that's not necessarily the reason, oh, I got to stay because I could be killed. Well,
Yeah.
I can make the right choices in preparation, which is that's what I'd like to talk
Preparation.
about you next
Yes.
is how
Yes.
do
That's
you
my big
leave?
thing.
And that's your big thing. Because
That's my big thing.
could you share with us how you were able to leave and what
Yeah.
was the buildup that you finally said, enough is enough? I need to figure something out. Was there, maybe there
Yeah.
wasn't that point. So
No,
please,
there
Beverly.
was. Yeah. So all throughout the relationship, mostly throughout the relationship, I could point to something I did to make him. That's not real, but like make him hit me. I could make it my fault the whole time. One morning, I woke up to him pushing me out of the bed. That's how I woke up. Like I wasn't already awake. I wasn't talking. I wasn't getting on his nerves. Nothing. I was just asleep. And so that was the moment. That was my moment that I realized for the first time I wasn't doing it. Because logically, what are you doing when you're sleeping? Like, that was his mistake. It was giving me a moment to think about it. What are you doing? I'm not doing anything. I'm asleep. I'm not snoring even. Like I'm just there. And so it clicked. It clicked that I wasn't doing this. And once it clicked that I wasn't doing this, I had a second realization, and that was that I could die. Because if this was something that I wasn't doing, it wasn't something I could control. And if it's not something I can control, it can escalate to places I can't even imagine. So I just had those moments, in that situation where I woke up when I woke up falling, where I was like, okay, this isn't adding up. Like nothing makes
No,
sense now. And so I write about it in the book, but there was some violence that morning, and I couldn't get out that exact day because I knew, as you mentioned before, I had to prepare. I knew that I couldn't run because I knew the second I ran, he would be right there. Just instinctively, I knew that that wasn't going to be a good end result for me. And so I decided to do the things I've been doing the whole 2 years I'd been with him, and just kind of try to de-escalate the violence and make things calm again. Only this time I was planning to get out. So trying to get the de-escalation wasn't to save myself or continue the relationship. It was to prepare. I needed time to plan. And so my
so
first step.
let's underscore that
Okay.
time to prepare.
Mhm.
So you need to really be mindful and intentional. But there's something else that I want to highlight of what you said, and that is there was an existential moment.
Mhm.
I could die. And that seemed to be pivotal for you. And that I've heard that before from other people, that there's this point when you know, oh my gosh, it's like the light bulb
Mhm.
turns on and I've got to
Just like
figure
that.
out how I'm going to prepare. So, okay.
Yeah.
So then what did you do?
So the first thing I did was go to the internet.
That
I
good
went
old
on
internet. Yes.
I went online, and as I mentioned before, Elaine, I hadn't identified as a survivor of abuse or a victim of abuse. I didn't think that's what was happening, even with all evidence pointing toward that. And so I went online, and I remember the first thing I Googled was, what does it mean when your husband hits you? That's how much I didn't know. That's how far away from my mind abuse was. I didn't even know what to call it. And so obviously all the results are, abuse, domestic violence, and, here's the website for this. So it led me to that place. The first place I went was the National Domestic Violence Hotline website. And they had almost immediately when you start to look at their website, there's something called safety planning. It just kind of pops up everywhere because they know, they want you to know that it takes planning. And so I just clicked on those links, and they had templates for, planning your leave. They had suggestions like making copies of your IDs and driver's license and debit cards, if possible, getting a storage unit and hiding things there, letting someone know what's going on so they'll know how to contact you, leaving phone numbers for, things that you don't have, phone numbers you don't have memorized, somewhere hidden so that you can, access them if you have to leave. One of the most important things that I found, though, was called an escape bag. And so I wanted to make one of those. An escape bag is essentially a bag of whatever you need, mostly toiletries, if you need to grab it and go. Because I didn't want that to be the case, but who's to say it wouldn't have been? I needed to run and go. So, in order to make that bag, as I mentioned, my ex husband um, didn't let me be alone much. And so I didn't have a car of my own. The only thing that he didn't like to do was grocery shop. So he would send me to the grocery store with the money in the car, and I would do it by myself. And so when I got there, every time I went, every other week or so, I would take money from the grocery money, and I used that money to buy, the travel aisle things like soap and toothbrush and toothpaste, to make my escape bag. I put some of the actual cash into the escape bag. One time I was at the store, and they had a copy machine back then. I don't know if they do now. This is 2010, but I was able to make copies of my IDs for like a quarter, things like that. And I made my escape bag that way. And I had just had that hidden in the closet. He also didn't really go in the closet like that. So I had that hidden in the closet where I knew he wouldn't find it. And from there, I had to call the domestic violence shelter locally. As you mentioned, which I'm glad you did, they don't give you an address.
No, they
you know,
don't.
they they don't, and I didn't know that at the time. So I was just kind of like, what? But they don't give you an address. They do tell you where to go, as a starting point if you need to get out. And they also tell you to call law enforcement if it's an emergency. They don't say to wait. There's no wait around for that. And so I called, I got the address to their administrative offices, and I mapped the bus route to their office because I didn't have a car. And this all took about 3 months. And then one day when he was at work, I grabbed my bag, I had the bus route, and I left. And I went to the shelter. Well, I went to the administrative offices.
And so that was the beginning. Now, was there anybody in your family that you could tell what was
Mhm.
happening to you or not? Did you feel like you couldn't
No, I
share
did.
and they knew what your
Yeah.
plans were?
Yes. Yeah. So after, I want to say though, I hadn't told them until I was ready to leave. I never told them that my husband was hitting me. Never once. And I did that because I still thought I could fix it. And if I was
Yeah.
able to fix it, I didn't want them to hate him because I knew that would happen. Especially my
Now,
brother.
do you think that in hindsight that you wish you would have said something sooner or not? You think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think I wish I would have, if for no other reason than they would have been able to plan with me. Planning alone was really hard. It was keeping those secrets. Secrets weigh on you. I swear, like they weigh you down. And so keeping all of those secrets was really hard. Pretending was really hard, when I would get on the phone and,
yeah.
maybe I was just crying, and then I have to pretend like I'm okay because my mom will definitely know if I was crying. She'll definitely know that. That was hard. So I wish I would have said something for safety purposes, but also to not carry that weight alone.
So you would give the advice now that if there is a person that's safe, to try to reach out to them to, so
Mhm,
that you're not so alone with it. Because I don't know, maybe
mhm.
or maybe not, that would have accelerated your leaving or not, but at
I
least
don't know.
there would have been a safety line that you could at least have talked to someone about what was going on that you trusted.
Yeah, and I think it really has to be someone that you trust. As you
Yeah.
mentioned, it's abuse is a really complicated, sensitive situation, and w- I say someone you trust, so because I think it has to be someone who cares for you, understands the severity of the situation, but also understands the complexities of it, and is not going to just grab you by the hand and say, "You're stupid if you stay, get out right now. This is ridiculous. You know better than that," because that doesn't help. That doesn't help. If anything,
No.
that would make me want to be like, "All right, calm down. Like we're fine. Everything's fine." It makes you defensive. And that's not a position you want someone
Right. And you
experiencing
can,
abuse
and
to
you know,
be
you can
in.
understand that if somebody loves you, they're going to go, honey, you got to get the hell out of there right now.
Yep.
And you're going, Mom, I can't leave right now. I can't, because you don't know the delicacy of it.
Yeah.
So almost you need someone
It's
who will be
hard.
there to listen to you, to
Mhm.
support you, and to maybe guide you in the
Yeah.
next steps without making a
Yeah.
judgment about if you're staying.
Right.
That's kind of like
Right.
the,
Yeah.
the components of it, because I think when we think about, the danger, that there
Mhm.
really is then a calculated risk
Mhm.
when you share something with someone. And if they push it, or if they decide they're going to call
Tell.
if they decide they're going to call them and you're not in
Right.
a safe place, that could put you in more danger, right? So
Everything is so dangerous, when
it's delicate.
yeah.
It's delicate.
Yeah. I think, part of the way that I made it, I don't know if I wanna say it that way. I know anyone that I would have told initially would have called him, like, and then the secret would have been out, and I don't know what that would have meant for me when he got home. And
Right.
so, but I wanna say I did tell people along the way, Elaine, and none of them helped me.
Huh.
Not
Interesting.
one person.
Not one person.
Not
Hmm.
one person. One was his cousin, so I kinda get that. She thought that, um and I don't say this, like, as a joke, but she sincerely thought that it was the devil who was, um, just trying to destroy our marriage, and that I just need to pray about it. That was her belief system, and so I don't, I try not to take that lightly, and that's the reason why she didn't offer help. The other person, though, was a counselor, a marriage counselor, and that marriage counselor, sat with us, and my ex-husband explicitly said, "I do this, like, I do hit her," to the marriage counselor, and the marriage counselor then turned to me and said, "Well, you need to figure out ways to get him not to hit you."
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so sorry that that happened to you, because that wasn't the wisest
It wasn't.
marriage
I
counselor.
know that now, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk
Yeah.
more about that. We're going to take a short break, Beverly. And I just want to say to our guests, we have so much more to talk about, because Beverly also started a hashtag why I stayed, that kind of caught fire. And we're going to talk a little bit about her advocacy and the other things that she does. We want to talk a little bit more too about how to get away. We're just touching the
Yeah.
surface on it right now. So we'll be back in a couple minutes, and we will continue our conversation. Welcome back. I'm here with Beverly Gooden, who is really quite an advocate regarding intimate partner violence. And she has had her own personal experience, and she has written a book. And I'm going to, now, what's the name of the book? Because I want everybody to go out and buy it
Yes.
again. So you say the name of your wonderful book.
Thank you. It's Surviving Why We Stay and How We Leave Abusive Relationships.
So anybody out there that wants to have more information with a really firsthand account, and also some really sound advice about how to think about creating your own plan of safety, or if you have
Mhm.
somebody that you love that you feel is in this situation, it can give you information to go about that. And
Yeah.
you can get it on Amazon, and I guess you said it's all over there. So
It's
yeah,
all over everywhere.
it's out there. So
Library, it's at the library if you like free stuff.
okay. So I just want to say one other thing too, as a professional licensed therapist, is that, part of course, I would have a different perspective than the therapist that you had, because
Mm,
it's very important that therapists work for the safety of both of their clients. And of
mm,
course, if someone comes to say, oh, I want to save my marriage, that of course is something that could be a common goal. But when there is abuse that has been expressed, it's also very important to talk about safety, and also for
Mhm.
the person who is the abuser to get help. We haven't talked much about that at this point, but if we don't help abusers get help to not be violent, then we're not going to stop,
Yeah.
intimate partner violence.
Right.
And we're not
Right.
talking about that on this show, but there are many programs that work with
Yeah.
perpetrators to try to help them not continue the cycle of violence.
And I just want to say, not all of them are like court ordered. Like, if you feel like you abuse, or you might, or you don't know, like maybe you have emotionally abusive behaviors and you want to get help, you can decide, to go and talk to someone in one of these organizations or groups. I think it's so important that you mention that, because, I think a lot of people can see abuse in themselves. Maybe not physical violence, but a lot of people can see themselves making statements like, if you love me, you will do exactly what I say. It's not physical, it's not good, it's still
Right.
bad, and so, my hope in life is that people will self-select as someone who needs further help to know how to have healthy relationships. I
Yes.
think if we even start there, like, that could be a good point.
Yes,
So
I think
yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, Beverly. And I want to ask you a little bit more though about your story about when you did leave, when you made that fateful day and you got away, you had your escape bag ready. Were
Yeah.
did he try to get a hold of you? Did he try to find you? Did you ever hear from him
No.
again?
I consider myself very lucky in that once I was gone, he didn't come after me. I think I've had a lot of time to process that, and I think it's because he had lost control. If you know me, like, once I made a decision, that is the decision. And so he knew I wasn't coming back. Like, he knew that that was it for the relationship. And so then he was just done with it, no contesting the divorce, no trying to get back together, none of that. But that is unusual, actually. Most abusers will do all of the things, including, continued violence, to try to get somebody back.
Okay. And so, is there anything more that you want to say to our listeners that as how do most survivors manage to get away? You've told us your
Mm.
experience. Is there anything you'd like to add to that before we move forward?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is to the rest of us that are not experiencing abuse. I think there are so many ways that we can help someone that we know is experiencing abuse. Unique ways too. I think one of those ways is you can open up a safety deposit box for someone, or you can help them open a PO box. You can have their mail rerouted to a safe mailing. Like, there are things that we can do to help others, and I think because we know that a lot of it is resources and fear and, love and things like that, we may be dealing with someone who doesn't want to leave or doesn't know that they should, that it's going to escalate. And so then we can step in, not by
You to know that
oh no.
we haven't skipped a beat. I talked about the I talked about the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and I've been just
Oh,
talking a little bit
yeah.
about having self-compassion
Mm,
and giving grace, because sometimes, as we know, after the fact, you're going, why did I do that? Why did
yeah,
I just said you did the very best you could
yeah,
during a situation that was very difficult. And I was
right.
just touching upon children and how important it is that if your child has observed the violence, important to get the
Mm,
children help, because not every child who grows up in a home where there's been violence becomes an abuser themselves, but some do. And so getting them help is one of the biggest things that you can do. I don't know if you have anything you want to say about that, Beverly.
I don't have any children, but my ex-husband has a story to tell about his childhood growing up, and or not tell, but I can attest that some children who have witnessed abuse or experienced abuse, can perpetuate that later in life. So I can attest to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so getting your child help would become very important. And if you do go to a shelter, they have programs set up for children too,
Yeah.
knowing
Yes.
that children have gone through that. But so I want to kind of like segue now that you're back online with us. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of movement you started. You created
Yeah.
the hashtag in 2014, hashtag why I stayed, and
Yes.
it caught fire. So what did that tell you? And
Yeah.
tell us what happened as a
Yeah.
result of that.
Yeah, so just to run it down quickly. So why I stayed was a hashtag that I started in 2014 in response to the Ray Rice video. He was a football player, Baltimore Ravens, and there was a video that TMZ released of him punching his fiancee in an elevator and dragging her
I
out.
remember that.
Right. So that came out, everyone was sympathetic towards her. And as soon as the news came out that she had since married him, all of that sympathy went away. So then it became, why would she stay with him? Why would she marry him? Like, what? I would never do anything like that. And that's the moment that I felt a significant amount of shame, not for being an abuse survivor, but one who chose to stay with the person who was abusive. And so I started to tweet my reasons for staying, and hundreds of thousands of people joined in. And it's so interesting because it lets me know that survivors want to talk about the complexities of domestic violence. They want you to know why someone would stay, because they want you, not you, but they want us to stop asking that question, because there are so many reasons. We've talked about a lot of them today. And I think the more that it's out there, the more that we push back on the why would you stay? Well, I would stay because of this, the less that question, the less prevalent that question will become. Now, I don't think anyone should feel pressured to say why they stayed or to even share their story of abuse out loud, because it's really hard to be on the internet talking about abuse because people are mean, very, very mean. So, it's not an easy journey, but for those of us who are comfortable or who want to do it, I feel like it's really important to continue talking about the reasons for staying. I read a story that someone stayed because they had a chronic health condition and their husband had the health insurance that was employer sponsored and therefore subsidized. And so without that husband and that insurance, they would have to figure out how to afford, health insurance, medication, all of these things. And that was their reason for staying. And it makes sense, like that makes sense. And so I think the more we talk about it, the easier it'll be on survivors in the future.
Well, Beverly, I'm here listening to you, and I just had this spark that came into me, and I'm going, wow, you didn't know anything about domestic violence. You
Mm.
just went on the internet that day and you just put that sentence in. And
Mhm.
now you have not only written a book, you caused really a movement, and
Yeah.
you sound very knowledgeable about all the different aspects that you're talking about. And I want to ask you a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is it about you that
Mm.
helped you get through? What is it about Beverly Gooden that somehow had this spark that was able to do this? Because boy, that is like amazing when I'm talking to you
I
about
don't
this.
know. I've never been asked that question
Well,
before.
look at
You
that.
know, I think I think so. After I left my ex-husband, I went back to grad school because I had left grad school at his urging to be with him. I went back to grad school and I started to study domestic violence. And so that's how I ended up writing my master's thesis about domestic violence. And then I never wanted to talk about it again. Like that was it. And so I think it's, I don't know. I don't like to see people suffer. I also don't like to see people bullied. Those are two things that I hate. It's always been a part of me. It makes it, I'm getting hot thinking about it. Bullying and just abuse itself. And I think that's what compels me to acknowledge my feelings, but also set them aside so that I can help other people. Because I think that it is conquerable. We can conquer abuse. It's going to take a lot. Like, it's not going to happen like tomorrow. But I think there are ways we can teach children early on what is healthy touching. When you like someone, you don't pinch them or you don't pull their hair. You say, I like you. And then if they don't like you back, what do you do with that rejection? How do you process that? You see what I'm saying? Like we can start
Well,
early,
so
you
we
know?
can start early. So what I'm hearing from you is that your empathy and compassion for those who suffered
Yeah.
also caused something to happen in you where you're now,
Yeah.
an author of a book about this. You now are talking about it on, national talk shows and TV
Yeah.
programs. And so this thing that was your great suffering
Yeah.
has become something that has given you great wisdom.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
just
think
like I
that's
always
it.
think that's kind of inspiring, like the
Oh,
things that happen to us in our lives. And so, it's like that little sign. I know it's kind of corny, but it says, when life gives you lemons, make
yeah.
lemonade.
I I have that sign in my kitchen, actually.
Oh my gosh, of course you do. Of course you do. I'm not surprised that you do. But because there is an optimism about
Yeah.
where you go from there.
Yeah, and
Yes.
lemonade is delicious, like, so
Yes.
something really bad can happen, and then you can make something beautiful out of it. And the end of my book, actually, Elaine, is hopeful. It's not a book that ends on a sad note or leaves you with a hanging trauma. And I wrote it that way on purpose. I want people to walk away from this book knowing, one, that I'm okay. I'm perfectly fine. Everything is good. Two, to know that I'm still healing and I believe that healing is perpetual, it's forever. You don't ever have to reach healing. I've attained healing. And three, that, through a lot of steps and help and planning, you can be okay as well. I believe that. I
Yeah.
believe that in my heart.
Well, and so it's such a hopeful message that you're leaving us with, but I think that's part of, like, as much as we suffer in life, and we know
Yeah.
that people are maybe listening to this program suffering right now,
Yeah.
there may be another side to this that is ahead of you, but that you have to
Yeah.
take those steps first to get there. And the
Yeah.
journey is treacherous, and it's
It's
not easy,
bad. Yeah.
and it's dangerous.
It's
But it
dangerous.
doesn't mean that there's not something, this show is called Resiliency Within. What does that
I love
mean?
it.
It's like, this aspect of ourselves that, yes, we can lean into the suffering, but we can
Mhm.
also lean into what else could be true. And what
Exactly.
you've done in your life is a testament to what else is true.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's absolutely remarkable, even going on and doing, your master's thesis on this. So I want to,
Yeah.
and this kind of leads me, what role does forgiveness play into moving on, when I just asked you that question? Forgiveness is such an important concept. So can you
Yeah.
share your insights about that?
Yeah, I think it's important, like, culturally. We talk a lot about forgiveness, and then in the religious spaces, I grew up in religion, and forgiveness is heavy there. Forgiveness now, I have different ideas about it. It's not moral to me anymore. I think forgiveness can have a really heavy morality tie. And to me, forgiveness is a choice. Forgiveness is a choice that you make based on the factors that you choose. So for me, as an example, in order for me to forgive you, or anyone who has done something, I need to see change, behavioral change. I need to see that first. I need you to say I'm sorry. I need you to acknowledge that you've caused me pain and feel sorry about it. I think a lot of times we forgive and we don't have any of those, because we believe that forgiveness is the path to peace, or that we have to forgive, if it's the most important thing. But I don't believe that. I think resolving what you've been through. Resolution for me is the path to peace. So I've resolved that abuse happened to me. It happened. I can't change that. And I let it go. I resolved to not speak to him again. I resolved to study healthy relationships and try to behave that way. But I don't choose to forgive. I don't have to, I don't believe that that's necessary. I believe if you want to, if you believe that in your heart, that's going to give you peace, do it. But I don't think we should hold that as a standard to getting peace. There are other things we can do to get peace. There are other things we can do to move on. And forgiveness doesn't have to be one of them.
Well, and I think that that's really, I love your perspective on it, because I think that some people can then go around beating themselves up. Why can't I forgive them?
Yes.
Right.
It's not good. It's not
Right.
good.
And so you can, and I like the word resolution, you can resolve that this happened, and
Yeah.
that you never want that to happen again. And you will live your
Right.
life in trying to
Mm,
stand in the presence of kind of
yeah.
justice. I think
Yes.
I'll talk of justice, right? And
Yeah.
say, no, that was wrong. And what happened to me was not right. And I can
Yes.
resolve that, and I can move forward. And I think
And I
there's,
could move forward.
yeah. And so I think there's many paradigms of looking at that. And I think that's another one for people to kind of chaw on a little bit, to see, okay, you
Yeah.
know, is that something that resonates with you or not? So
And I just wanted to quickly say that we've heard in the past, I don't know if anyone else has, people always say forgiveness is a gift to yourself. Like, forgiveness is for you. And I don't see how that makes sense. Forgiveness is a gift to the person receiving it. They are receiving your absolution, right? They're receiving that from you. That's a gift that you're giving to them. If they haven't earned it, or if you don't want to give that yet, that should be okay. That
Yeah.
should be okay.
All right. So Beverly, oh my goodness, I could talk to you for another hour.
You too.
Yeah. So I've got one parting question as we're getting
Yes.
close to ending, is that if someone came up to you right now and said they were in an
Mhm.
abusive relationship but didn't want to leave because they still love their abuser, what would you say to them?
I would say that that is not foolish. I would say that that makes sense. I would also say what I've learned is that we can love people from a distance. We don't have to love them by being in a relationship with them. We don't have to love them by talking to them. We can love them in our hearts, and then maybe one day we won't love them anymore. But love doesn't have to tie us to our abuser because we can love people from a distance. And so it makes sense, that you love the person that you're with, and that love is there. But I think, knowing that we can love people from a distance, what's your next step? Is it to tell
Yeah.
someone what's going on, someone that you trust, someone that you consider to be safe? Talk to them, bring them into the situation, ask them to help you think through what's happening. Is this dangerous for me? Is this a red flag? Am I in trouble? Tell someone that you trust what's going on and help them, and have them help you make next steps, because love is important. Love tied me to my ex-husband, but love wouldn't have saved me in the end.
Right.
It won't
And
save your
and
life.
so the other thing I would want to just add to what you said is also create a safety plan in
Yes,
case you needed to leave, if you felt you were in harm's way or your children were.
for sure.
Where's your escape bag, and where can you keep it and create that safety plan? I
Right.
also want people to know that they can go to your webpage. Can you tell them your
Yes,
webpage? Yes, if they want to get in
yes.
touch with you.
So my website is beverlygooden.com. That's last name is spelled GOODEN.com. And the book, Surviving Why We Stay and How We Leave Abusive Relationships, is available everywhere, anywhere you want.
So I hope that you can all see the light in how Beverly shows up in the world, and how she
Oh,
really did take the suffering and create something amazing from it. And it seems like you're not done yet either. You're continuing on this journey. And
yes.
I just want to say to my listeners, that I often end the show by saying, what else is true? And
Mhm,
and there is no greater testament to Beverly Gooden of the suffering she had, and she really sought out what else was true about her life,
mhm.
even going on to
I
create
love
a
that.
hashtag that has been, what was it, thousands of people have responded because it
Yeah.
was the right thing to say at the right time, to be with people who were suffering. So
Yes.
with that, Beverly, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Until we meet again,
Yay.
and Voice America listeners, we will see you next time. And remember the National Abuse Hotline. If you feel
Yes.
you or someone 800-799-7233, and you can start to get help today. Blessings to all of my listeners, wherever you are on the globe.